What's up, folks? I'm Odd, by the way. So, an increasingly long time ago, the main way of getting leaks slash potential advertisement information about an upcoming generation of Pokemon games, especially in the United States, came from the internet, but specifically through, I think, a games magazine in Japan called Koro Koro that was then translated to English on websites like Cerebi. Similar stuff exists today, but we see a lot more like actually accurate leaks and like data mining and stuff that all kind of surpass that. But the original magazine, which is what Koro Koro was, they would show the silhouettes of the upcoming starter Pokemon, which was the last like way that hype cycle worked before Pokemon started being released internationally, so any news was kind of more internationally available, I suppose, and not just released in Japan first and then released in America. So one of the things is that they were notably kind of misinterpreted a lot. I mean, obviously, like any well professionally designed character, they have very strong silhouettes, and you know, we as a Pokemon fandom are definitely used to identifying things by their silhouettes.
Who's that Pokemon?
It's Pikachu!
It's Clefairy!
But it's still difficult to immediately translate that silhouette without context. So what I wanted to do today for our Pokemon week was make some Fakemon based off of the original, like the silhouettes of some of the original starter or first partner Pokemon, as they call them now. So I have all 9 gens of starters pulled up on clip here with different folders for each of them, and each is a different file as well, so that I can select them. And I'm going to be rolling first, I think 3 for the sake of making new starters, and I'll probably try to adhere to that, and because it's what I usually do anyway. I will be rolling between the numbers of 1 and 9 initially, and then in that generation between numbers 1 and 3, obviously assigning the individual Pokemon 1, 2, 3. So if I get like Gen 1 and then Pokemon 1, that's going to be Bulbasaur here, right? So that's the general idea, and I will then make fully like try to fully map to the silhouette while still making a completely different Pokemon, possibly even a completely different type, because that's what those like Koro Koro interpretations did all those years ago, and I thought that it would be super fun and kind of a blast from the past for me. So let's just hop right in and grab our first Pokemon. So first up, we generate our generation this is coming from. So 1 through 9, and I got 5. Okay, so Gen 5, and then between 1 and 3, boop, 3. Okay, so Gen 5, number 3, that is going to be Oshawott. Alright, let me just color that in to make sure that I know what I'm using later. So that is our first Mon. So for our second selection, if you've probably gotten the idea by now, so generation 1 through 9, boop, 1, alright, Kanto, and then between numbers 1 and 3, boop, 1. Alright, so like my example, we get 1 and 1, so we have Bulbasaur. Very recognizable design. I'm curious to see how I can interpret this into something else. But okay, our final selection then, 6. So Gen 6, X and Y, and between 1 and 3, 3. So that is Froakie. So I have our 3 Pokemon here, and I will pop those over in my own time, so I don't need to mess with this right now. I'm not immediately sure off the top of my head. I really have to look at these, right? Like, I feel like there's no way that Bulbasaur like can't be like quadrupedal, for one. So, like, that's going to be interesting to try and figure out. Maybe some sort of like dog, perhaps. I could go for. It is a very strong silhouette, and it's so familiar, so it's hard to figure out what might go there. Oshawott. I feel like there are some ways that it could go. Like, it's missing an arm here, so it's like, is this like a lower body situation, you know? I don't know. And then Froki is kind of all sorts of messed up, like, not in terms of the design itself, obviously, but the silhouette, though, like, visible, is kind of hard to read as, like, immediately Froki to me. But at that, I think that I am going to just throw this over to speed paint voiceover and show you guys what I came up with when we get there, because I need to think on this for a little bit, so I'll see you there. Alright, starting out with our Oshawott silhouette, which is actually quite on brand for this particular idea. I learned while looking up stuff to reference in this video that I had misremembered, as I usually seem to do with Pokemon, but only Gen 5 seemed to get the starter silhouette treatment. I had only seen a handful of these prior to this, and man, they are as creative as they are goofy. I did almost align with one interpretation where Oshawott was made into a more squat character carrying an acorn, but in my case I was thinking of a potential fire type or something, carrying a spiky ball or one of those giant submersible mines. Eventually I did go back to making the head the head. This was definitely one of the three that I picked at the most. There was one point where I got as far as coloring before going back and changing up a good portion of the design. Initially, I was going to do a superhero design where the Pokemon is wearing some sort of suit and called it Sidekit, like Sidekick. I did decide to keep the name, but I made the overall look something a bit more like a Disney Robin Hood vibe, so they're a bit more roguish now. I decided to make them a grass type, and though I wanted to keep these characters starters and first steps, I did allow myself to dual type them from the start, even if that isn't usually the case. So this little guy is a grass dark type. Sidekit is a mischievous Pokemon who is willing to align with anyone they find capable, whether that is a stronger Pokemon or a human, and often act as gophers for bigger, nastier Pokemon in the wild. They seem to admire strength, possibly hoping to obtain their own, but they can also be quick to turn on their leaders if they find a better opportunity. As partner Pokemon, they may show a bit more of a soft side, but they can still act backhanded and sinister. If they're confronted directly, however, they'll usually grovel dramatically or attempt to run away. Or both. Next up is the Bulbasaur. I wanted to make all three types of typical starters, so grass was out here. I got a concept that I stuck with much more quickly with this one. The pointed cheek of the face offered a very beak-like shape, which makes sense because Bulbasaur is very dinosaur-like and dinosaurs are just like primordial birds. I don't think that there's been a very prominent Griffin Pokemon yet, and that does seem like a Pokemon that could be a starter. I made the massive bulb on the back, some wings sort of cradling some flame-shaped plumage because I decided to go for a fire type in the end. Getting the face right was the major problem for me here. Eventually I did land on a beak that I liked. The colors turned out somewhat similar to a scarlet macaw, and the beak is very finch-like. I don't think this is a very predatory griffin. But that's okay because they're also a baby. I was already trying to figure out an excuse for the weirdness in the wings, and I figured it could be some sort of camouflage in volcanic terrain, so I added some little orange baby spots on the little bit of the back half you can see. This is certainly a chonky baby griffin. I named them Grifflame. I considered Griffinix, but I figured that kind of name might be reserved for the final evolution that, doesn't exist, but these are starters, so in theory it could. Grifflame are usually taken care of by their parents in the wild until they evolve, so they're naturally a little shy and fragile. Their plumage resembles the volcanic terrain they live on, and when they're spooked, they puff up their wings and fire-like plumage to better resemble a volcano in an attempt to scare off predators. Unlike some fire types, they don't actually have physical fire on their body, just their bright orange plumage that resembles it. They're quick to imprint on their trainers and see them as their mamas. And finally, we have the Froakie, and oh god, I've painted myself into a corner here. It needs to be a water type. This was possible given I rolled the 2 water types, but maybe I should have tried to make Bulba one. Regardless, I decided to take a crack at making another water type out of a water type silhouette. What immediately came to mind was that the hand reaching up could be some sort of water spout, and maybe the eyes could be ears. Initially, I tried a rabbit, then kind of a bear or a puppy, and I even tried an elephant at one point, but as I was trying to make the right side into a face, it kept looking too humanoid, or maybe like a big ol' koala nose. I even got the idea for the name and secondary typing out of this. Those starters don't typically have other starting types, like water, fire, grass, as their secondary. If they have a secondary typing at all, I thought it might be interesting to have a water grass type because koalas are known for eating eucalyptus. And given its smell, it would make sense that perhaps the water they produce might take on a calming smell, much like tea. That's right. It's koala tea time. No, seriously, their name is koala tea. Koala tea is a very lax, almost lazy Pokemon with a slightly rude disposition. They are regularly chewing aromatic leaves that they mix with the water they produce to create a calming tea that is likely what keeps them so relaxed. That being said, they're known to spit this tea at those that seem to be disturbing their rest. Some take it as an offense, while others simply an invitation to come to koala tea's level of calm. A number of companies, many having nothing to do with tea, will try to make koala teas their mascots for the overdone pun on quality. But those are my silhouette Pokemon. I think I made them look like they belong in an RPG, at least. Maybe not Pokemon, but an RPG. This was definitely a challenge. It was a bit like a puzzle trying to work within the constraints of existing silhouettes. My favorite here is probably Koality. I think I really hit my stride right at the end there. That being said, I do kind of adore the concepts that came out of these, so I might try to make them more their own thing as Fakemon in the future, without having to match a silhouette. Let me know what you think in the comments and any other challenges you might like to see me do in the future, Pokemon or otherwise. I sort of switch it up from week to week. At that though, I will leave this here and I'll see y'all next time.